Elaine rushed around the house, a whirlwind of activity. She gathered homework assignments, shoved feet into shoes, and stuffed backpacks with snacks, all while stealing glances at her watch. It was 7:55 a.m. The bus would arrive in 5 minutes. "Hurry up and eat your breakfast," she called to her 2 children, James and Sophie, who were still seated at the kitchen table. They gulped down their cereal as Elaine tied Sophie's hair into a ponytail. This was their morning routine, a rush of organized chaos to get the kids ready for school. For Elaine, a busy single mom juggling a full-time job along with caring for her family, every minute counted. Later that day, as Elaine drove home from work, her mind swirled with the evening's tasks. Make dinner, help with homework, do laundry, pay bills. She sighed, wishing for just a few more hours in the day. Her life always seemed to be a race against time. As Elaine turned down her street, she noticed an antique shop she didn't recognize. Strange, she thought. She was sure nothing had been there yesterday. A vintage sign read, "Aged to Perfection, Antiques and Curiosities," in ornate calligraphy. Her curiosity piqued, Elaine parked and entered the dusty shop. The interior was dimly lit and cluttered with antique furniture, clocks, and unusual trinkets. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with white hair pulled into a tight bun. "Hello, dearie, can I help you find something?" she asked in a creaky voice. "Just browsing, thanks," replied Elaine as she meandered through the aisles. One item caught her eye, an exquisite antique watch in a glass case. The watch's face was pristine white with Roman numerals and delicate hands that curled into elegant spirals. The band was gold, intricately engraved with motifs of time. Elaine couldn't take her eyes off it. There was something strangely alluring about the old watch. "Ah, I see you've spotted my most treasured piece," said the shopkeeper. "It's beautiful," said Elaine. "Is it a replica?" "No, my dear, it's quite real. This watch has been in my family for generations. It possesses a certain quality, shall we say, that makes it special." The woman unlocked the case and placed the watch in Elaine's hands. Elaine could swear she felt it pulse, as if time itself beat within it. "What do you mean by its quality?" asked Elaine. The woman's eyes twinkled. "Let's just say it has the ability to control time itself, if used properly. For the right owner, it can be quite useful." Elaine looked skeptical, but she couldn't deny the watch seemed to call to her. On an impulse that she didn't quite understand, Elaine bought it and placed it carefully in her purse. "Use it wisely," the shopkeeper whispered with a knowing smile. At home that evening, the familiar chaos ensued. Elaine scrambled to make dinner while Sophie cried over her homework and James begged for snacks. "Enough!" shouted Elaine, frustration bubbling over. She couldn't take the noise and demands anymore. Just a moment of peace. That's all she wanted. Suddenly, she remembered the watch tucked in her purse. Could the shopkeeper have been telling the truth? Elaine pulled it out, hands trembling. She turned the delicate hands clockwise a few times. Nothing happened. Disappointed, she started to put it away. Then she noticed the second hand had stopped ticking. In fact, everything had stopped. Sophie's tears, James's pleas, the bubbling pots on the stove. Time itself stood still. Elaine gasped. The watch worked. She had all the time she needed. Moving quickly, she finished cooking and helped the frozen kids with homework, savoring the quiet. With a twist backward, time resumed its flow. Elaine smiled, fingering the watch. Finally, she had control. Over the next week, Elaine used the watch relentlessly. She froze time to complete chores, run errands, and even just nap. She felt energized, accomplished, and relieved of the constant pressure. But she noticed changes. The watch now seemed to pulse faster as she wound it, as if eager for her touch. Plants withered when frozen mid-bloom. Food spoiled rapidly when time was altered. And each time she restarted time, Elaine felt a growing sense of unease, like reality itself had shifted. Ignoring the warning signs, Elaine continued to overuse the watch. It was just so addictive to press pause on the chaos of life. She was hooked on the control it gave her and didn't care about the consequences. At first, the changes were subtle. Milk expired overnight. Flowers wilted in seconds when Elaine froze them. She noticed gray hairs and wrinkles on neighbors who seemed to age years in days. But Elaine was blinded by her obsession with the watch. She did notice her family changing too. James and Sophie seemed to grow inches overnight, their clothes too small, voices deeper. Mark, her husband, looked older when he came to pick up the kids, hair thinning and lined face sagging. "You look so tired lately," he said to Elaine one evening. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Elaine replied brusquely. In truth, she felt exhausted and on edge, but she couldn't give up the watch. She just needed more time. Elaine's family aged rapidly, like fruit ripened to rottenness in no time. James's voice cracked and dropped an octave as fuzz spread on his cheeks. Sophie looked gaunt, stripped of the plump softness of childhood. Mark transformed from virile man to wizened senior seemingly overnight, wrinkled and hunched, hair completely white. He had trouble remembering things. The kids, formerly energetic, spent their time slumped and weary. Only Elaine remained untouched, a vigorous woman frozen in time while her family succumbed to rapid decay around her. She knew it must be the watch, but she couldn't stop. Just a bit more time, she told herself. She could fix this. Desperate, Elaine drove back to the antique shop, seeking answers. But where the quaint store once stood was just an empty lot, like it had never existed. Starting to panic, Elaine went online, digging through obscure history sites, occult forums, and blogs. She learned the watch had a long, dark legend behind it. All who had used its power had paid a terrible price, aging lifetimes in days as time extracted its due. Elaine now understood the cost of meddling with time, but it was too late. She couldn't give up the control and rush of using the watch, even as everything she loved withered away. Elaine tried to stop using the watch. She really did. She locked it away out of reach, trying to maintain a normal routine. But stress, temptation, and bone-deep craving pushed her to just a quick use here and there. And each time, her family aged further. She started avoiding them, frightened by their frail, elderly appearance and her guilt. She couldn't stand to look at what her addiction had done. It was easier to pause time and ignore the problem before her. But even frozen, Elaine could feel their dock ticking down. It seemed no time had passed for Elaine, but years had ravaged her frozen family. James and Sophie were thin, elderly, feeble. Mark was on his deathbed, wheezing and rattling with each breath. Desperate, Elaine used the watch again, thinking she could research a cure. But when time stopped, rapid decay gripped everything in sight. Food rotted instantly, plants blackened, objects corroded. When Elaine restarted time, she shrieked in horror. Her family looked like corpses, flesh shriveling on brittle bones, eyes milky, faces sunken. They had not long to live after so many years stolen. Guilt crushed Elaine. What had she done? She had to fix this. But deep down she wondered if the damage could ever be undone. "Please, you have to help," Elaine begged the old clockmaker, who studied her watch with a grave expression. She had told him everything, all she had done and the disastrous results. The clockmaker sighed. "This antique is cursed by foul magic. I have heard legends but never thought to see it." He inspected the watch's sinister pulses. "Can you reverse the effects?" Elaine implored, tears in her eyes. The clockmaker pondered, then shook his head. "Nothing can undo what's been done. Time always extracts its due, but there may be a way to reset its flow. Long ago, I read a tale about this watch and how its owner tried to undo the damage they caused," the clockmaker explained. "They turned the hands backward in desperation, attempting to reset time. But it made things far worse. Reality splintered, fracturing the poor soul into a fragmented echo of existence, trapped forever outside of time." He leveled a grave look at Elaine. "If you try to reverse time, you may doom yourself and remain in the eternity you created. The risk is immense." Elaine trembled, the watch heavy in her hands. Could she gamble with her very soul to try and fix this? Elaine's fingers itched to immediately wind the watch backward. If she could undo everything, maybe her family could be saved. She could erase her mistakes. But the clockmaker's ominous words gave her pause. What if she made things worse and lost herself forever, erased from reality, a wandering phantom? She wanted to rush ahead recklessly, but forced herself to stop. She had to carefully consider her next steps. The urge to blindly turn back time pulled at her, but she resisted. She couldn't give in to temptation again, no matter how strong. There had to be another way, right? Elaine's mind raced. But deep down, she knew there was only one path forward. She had to try turning back time, even with the risks. She was desperate to revive her dying family and would do anything, pay any price. She knew it might unravel reality forever, but Elaine couldn't stand by and watch her family age another second because of her mistakes. Whatever the cost, She had to try and make things right again. With trembling hands, Elaine steeled herself. She bid the clockmaker farewell, thanking him for his warning. As she left the shop, she felt the weight of destiny heavy upon her. It was time to face the consequences of her actions. At home, Elaine took a deep breath and gripped the watch. "Please work," she whispered. Ever so carefully, she turned the hands counterclockwise, winding time backwards. The effect was instant. The room quaked and spun around her. Furniture and plants de-aged rapidly into dust. Outside, the sun flew across the sky in reverse. Elaine kept turning the watch's hands. She was caught in a vortex of reversing time, years peeling back into nothingness. She started to scream, but no sound came out. It felt like she was being ripped into scattered pieces. With a silent explosion, everything went black. Elaine lost consciousness, the cursed watch falling from her hand to shatter on the floor. She had risked everything to turn back time. There was no going back now. Elaine's eyes fluttered open and she winced, regaining hazy awareness. She expected to see her family restored, the house returned to normal. But everything around her was a crumbling ruin. The remains of her home were decayed with age, furnishings rotten and collapsed. Outside, the landscape was barren, sky dark and lifeless. The air held no sound or movement. With dawning horror, Elaine realized she hadn't reset time, but had transported herself into its broken remains, a fragmented end of reality. She was trapped in the very oblivion she had created. Panicked, Elaine ran outside, calling her family's names. "Mark! James! Sophie!" Her voice echoed unanswered across the empty wasteland. She was completely alone. She wandered the deserted neighborhoods and city streets, but not a single soul could be seen. It was as if everyone else had vanished, leaving Elaine in this aged, dying world. The full weight of what she had done crashed down on Elaine. She had destroyed everything she loved and doomed herself to this empty, rotten existence outside of time. She fell to her knees and wept bitterly. Elaine wasn't sure how much time passed in this fragmented end of reality. Seconds and years meant nothing here. She roamed aimlessly, moving through the motions of life with no purpose. Stumbling over a piece of debris one day, Elaine was startled to see the watch's shattered face peering up at her. In anger, she stomped on the crumpled device, grinding it under her heel. The last hopes of using the watch to escape drained from Elaine as she destroyed it fully. Now there truly was no going back, and no way out of this eternal, lonely hell. With no watch and no future, Elaine eventually stopped her wandering and found shelter in the ruins of her decaying home. She resigned herself to an existence frozen outside of time and meaning. As days, weeks, and years blurred into uncounted misery, Elaine withered. She never starved to death, but became a ghostly wraith, consumed by anguish. Her mistakes had led her family to oblivion and herself to this fate worse than death. Elaine's spirit shattered along with the watch. This empty, rotting world was now hers, an eternity of consequences for wanting to control time and change her family's fates. She was trapped forever in her own regret, with no hope of redemption.